What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been following along, this is an engine out of my dad's 2012 Chevy Silverado 1500 that we are going to be doing an AFM DOD delete with a nice little cam upgrade. But once we got into this thing, we found nothing but issues, and I don't want to drop it right back in my dad's daily driver. So we're going to wrap this one up, put it to the side to build later on, and we had to go track down a new engine for him. I asked you guys in the comments of the last video what engine you think we should find for this truck, and I was able to come across a nice 6-liter. This is an Ly6, so it has rec port heads as well as the rec port intake manifold, and it's basically going to be the same engine that's in our ProCharge GTO, minus an aluminum block versus an iron block. So I think this is going to be a great candidate for our new BTR cam, and it's going to go really good in this little Chevy Silverado 1500. I think it's going to work out perfectly for us. So let's get through the intro and get to work. Through the intro, we can start getting ready to tear down our new engine, but before we do that, I want to give you guys a quick look at it. So let's take a closer look at our new Ly6. Like I said before, it is an Ly6, which means it's one of the more desirable 6-liters. They come with the 823 heads. So this thing is basically going to be an iron block mirror image of what we have in the GTO. It's all rec port, so this thing's going to flow really good, especially with our new BTR cam. This thing came fully dressed, and we got it at Next Gen Parts Place. So if you guys need anything diesel, LS, or Coyote, make sure to check them out. This one's supposed to have around 122,000 miles on it, and it had good oil pressure. As you guys can see, it's a little bit crusty, but we'll get this thing cleaned up and start getting ready to put it in the truck. Real quick, guys, me from the future here. I sat down to edit today's video, and I realized that I did film all of the disassembly from the new Ly6 6-liter, but I didn't want to put it into today's video and make you guys feel like you were sitting through the same video twice, because it is identical to the video we did 2 weeks ago, the BTR cam install fail video, when we disassembled the 5.3 that came out of this truck. Everything came apart identical between the 5.3 and the 6-liter, minus it being a 6-liter and having rec port heads. All the disassembly is identical, so I didn't want to bore you guys with making you watch it twice. If that's something that you guys really want to see, though, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll put it together as a separate video and post it this week. So make sure to let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. But with that being said, we're going to jump back into today's video at the point where we have the new Ly6 up on the engine stand, and we're pulling the cylinder heads off for the very first time, right before we start prepping it, cleaning it, and getting ready to install all of our new parts. So let's get back to today's video. Kind of mad we had to take it apart. That thing was sealed. All right, the cylinders actually look fantastic on this thing. Like I said, it's supposed to have 120,000 miles on it, but that thing looks really good. So we'll set this to the side and we'll get the other one pulled off. So now that we've got the new Ly6 torn down, Dad had some time the other day and came out here and started cleaning it. Started going to work on the block, and it actually cleaned up really nice. Got most of that coating and rust off of it. We've got a little bit more work to do. That timing cover is gonna be out of here. We've got a new one from BTR, but we're gonna go ahead and get this thing cleaned up, degrease it, and I think I'm gonna give it a fresh coat of engine gloss black just to get that thing looking right. But over here on the table, I'm going to start working on the cylinder heads. So we've got the first one up here on the bench, and this is the one that had the broken off bolt from the exhaust manifold. So I've got to tackle that at some point. I've also got to strip this thing down, get it cleaned up so we can put our new parts on here from Brian Tooley Racing. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the spring compressor out. We'll get this thing stripped down, get the valves out of it and the springs. Then we'll go ahead, tackle this broken bolt. Then we can start cleaning it up and putting some new parts on. So I've got my spring compressor set up here. We're gonna go ahead and start cranking this down so that we can get the valve spring, keeper, and retainers out of here. And we're gonna take the valve out so I can clean everything up. I'm not gonna go into great detail in this video on this because I just recently did a video on the Honda playlist going over all of this. I did a DIY port as well as new valve springs, cleaning the valves, and a whole bunch more in that video. And all of the same principles still apply, even though that is a overhead cam engine. So if you guys want to see more on that, you can go back on the Honda playlist and check it out. I went into great detail there. So today we're just gonna blow through this. I'm gonna get all these out, and then we'll clean it up, and I'll show you guys what we end up with. That is a much bigger valve than what would have been in the Honda, that's for sure. But like I said, same principles still apply. So I've got all the valves out of the head. They all look really good actually. And all of the ports and seats where the valves go look really good. So I'm super happy with that. We're just gonna give it a super quick hand lap when the time comes. Like I said, if you guys wanna see more on redoing a cylinder head, go back and check out the Honda video. Same exact principles apply. But the next thing that we're gonna do now is try to tackle this broken bolt. So I found a nut that fits it pretty decently, and we're just gonna hold that with a pair of pliers, and I'm gonna use the MIG welder and try to weld to it and see if we can't get that thing to pop free. So let's throw a valve cover on it just to keep everything covered, and we'll give this thing a shot. Gonna go ahead and try to weld the nut to the broken bolt and see if we can't get it out. So we ended up drilling a little hole in the center of the bolt to give us something to weld to, because it didn't want to stick to the surface. So after we did that, I turned the welder way up and just went for it. And so far it seems to be working. Got it. Voila. It's out, guys. So that worked out for us. We got the nut welded on successfully. Took a couple tries, but we did get it. We're good to go. We'll check that thread with a new bolt and make sure it's good. And we are ready to start cleaning this head up. As you guys can see, we've got our new LY6 all masked off. We decided we were going this far, so we might as well get this thing cleaned up a bit. So we masked it off, rolled it outside, and hit it with some super clean and then the garden hose. And it came out really good, got all the oils and greases off of this thing. But we are left with a lot of scaly rust from the original coating. So we used a needle gun or a descaler, and we went ahead and hit it with that and got all of that off. We did a pretty decent job. We're not going showroom quality here, but it looks pretty decent. So now that we got that all done, I grabbed a couple cans of this Duplicolor engine enamel. We're gonna hit it with that, just a nice gloss black to get this thing looking nice. So let's get set up and we'll hit this with a couple coats of paint. As you guys seen yesterday, I went ahead and got a coat of gloss black on the block, and it came out really good for just a quick spray after hitting it with that needle gun, the descaler. Got most of the rust off. It's looking really good. As you can see, Dad's working on getting the head surfaces cleaned up. He's got this side pretty much good to go. Working on this side right now. So right now we're just doing a whole bunch of the boring stuff. I've got the heads over here. As you guys seen, we got all of the valves out of them and on boxes to keep them organized so they go back where they belong. Now that we've got the cylinder head mating surface all cleaned up to a point where we're happy with, those are ready to go out and get washed inside and out, get all the carbon and oil off of them, get them nice and fresh. Dad's working on a few other parts over here that we're gonna bring out to get washed in a few minutes, and I'm over here getting these valves ready. So as you guys can see, we've got all of our valves and everything laid out here, trying to keep them in order. I'm not gonna go into crazy detail on how I clean them, because just recently on the Honda playlist for the new engine build that we're doing on that car, we went ahead and did this same thing with the head that we have for that. So I just used some WD-40, some Scotch-Brite pad on our drill press and get these things all cleaned up. So let's get to work and I'll show you guys what they look like when we're done. tempting to wipe these things off while it's spinning, but don't do it. The rag will get caught up. But we got this one all cleaned up. It looks pretty much like brand new. A little bit of stuff right there, but it looks good enough for what we're doing. So we'll pop it out, move to the next one, and just get these things jammed out. Now that we've got the block painted, the valves are clean, and we're getting ready to start cleaning some parts, I want to go ahead and pull the oil pan off. So we're going to go ahead and zap this thing off real quick, and we'll bring it out with us to wash it. I will say this engine has been extremely sealed up. Everything we've taken off so far, the gasket has stuck so well that you had to mangle it to get it off. So that's kind of interesting to see. But now that we got this off, we can take the pan over to the bench, clean it up, and I'm also going to be deleting this pressure relief valve. So let's get this thing over to the bench and start cleaning it up. Sorry about any background noise, guys. It is super windy and rainy here today, so I'm going to try to speak a little louder for you. But we're gonna go ahead and start prepping this head so that we can get ready to reassemble it, starting with cleaning it. I'm gonna do the same thing that we did a few videos back with our super cheap Turbo Civic when we were building the head for that. So I've got some super clean here and a cleaning kit with these little brushes. It's got a whole bunch of different sizes. I'm gonna start by just cleaning up the outside a little bit. It's not a show motor, but just clean it up a little bit. Then we're gonna do the ports, intake and exhaust ports. And then we will go ahead and clean out the valve guides last so that we can get any debris out of them when we're rinsing out the rest of this head. So as you guys seen yesterday, we took some time to get everything all cleaned up, and it all came out really good. I'm super happy with it. We use Super Clean, which is a very aggressive degreaser. If you use it, be careful. Make sure to rinse everything really good afterwards. Maybe even use some Dawn dish soap and then rinse again. And then blow dry the surface with like compressed air. Get everything dry, and then hit any important parts like the valve guides or the head mating surface with some WD-40. It'll save you headaches later and keep everything looking nice and fresh. So now that we've got everything all cleaned up, we can finally start lapping some valves and installing some new parts on Dad's new motor. But before we do that, I want to show you guys all the parts that we're going to be using today. So let's break them out on the bench and take a look. So as you can see, I've got a whole bunch of new parts laid out on the table here. I'm going to try to run through them super quick because I will mention anything new that we're installing as we go. But if you guys need any of this stuff, reach out to our boy EDGTUNED. He put this whole package together for us so that we were just good to go, one-stop shop. He deals a lot with BTR, so make sure to hit him up. But as you guys can see, we're running all BTR products here. This stuff was originally ordered to go in his 5.3, but now since we're swapping in an Ly6, we're going to be using all of this on the new motor. So we've got a BTR truck Norris cam. This is the one that requires valve springs. So we've got BTR Beehive 560 springs, their LS7 style lifters, as well as a 1-bolt to 3-bolt cam conversion kit, including new bolts, and their VVT plug adapter, as well as the cam guide, and some valve seals and lifter trays. We also have a new balancer bolt from them, and I went online, got some Jegs new header bolts. They also sent us their VVT delete timing cover so that we should be good to go and slap all that stuff on. I did pick up a cheap catch can online so that we keep that intake manifold that we just cleaned nice and clean, try to keep any oil and stuff out of it. We're also going to be using BTR LS2 style head gaskets. I did have some Granatelli Motorsports plug wires on the shelf, brand new, so we're going to be throwing those on here as well as any other miscellaneous little gaskets, water pump, oil pan, valley cover, all that stuff obviously we're going to need. But I just wanted to touch on this super quick before we start slapping this thing together. So now that you guys have seen the majority of the parts that we're going to be using today, let's get the cylinder heads over here so we can start lapping some valves and start getting those things reassembled. Now that I'm all set up, we can start lapping some valves. I'm not gonna go too crazy into detail because I just covered this in detail on building the head for our new Turbo Civic engine. So not gonna go too crazy into detail, but I'll give you guys a quick run through on how we're gonna do these valves. So I like to take a little bit of WD-40, spray it in the valve guides so that the valve has a little bit of lubrication while it's spinning around in there. Then we have some Permatex valve grinding compound right here. We're going to take a little bit of that, and I just put it in a few different spots depending on the size of the valve itself. This one has a pretty good size intake valve, so we'll put some right around it, just like so. Then we can go ahead and plop this down into the head, just like that. And we're going to take one of our valve lapping tools, which in our case is this little suction cup one that we have right here. Some of these work better than others. Honestly, this is a cheap one I've had for a long time, so it doesn't work that great. But these ones are in pretty good shape. The Honda head was pretty rough, so we had a lot more work to do. This one's not going to be as bad, so it should be nice and easy for us. So I'm just going to take and turn the valve a few times, get that valve lapping compound distributed in there, just like so. And then I'm going to take the valve lapping tool between my hands, just like I'm trying to start a fire. And then every few times I like to pick it up and rotate it a little bit. So now that we've lapped it a little bit, turned it a few times, you could hear the pitch change as the compound breaks down. So now we're gonna go ahead and just carefully pull this valve out. You wanna make sure not to get any valve grinding compound on the valve stem. We'll pull this out, set it aside for a second, and I'm gonna clean up our mating surface here, the valve seat. We've got a nice uniform flat finish. It's not shiny, but it is uniform going all the way around the valve seat, and then the same on the valve itself. As you guys can see, a very nice uniform finish all the way around with a flat finish to it. So I'm really happy with how that came out. We'll go ahead and move on to the rest of these. I'm just gonna get these jammed out real quick so that we can start reassembling the head with our new valve springs and new valve seals. So let's get these done and start assembling them. Now that we've got all the valves lapped, we can finally start reassembling this thing. Now, like I mentioned before, we're gonna be using the BTR Beehive 560 lift springs. They're gonna go perfectly with our truck Norris camshaft. They're a nice little beehive style spring, nice direct replacement. We can still use the spring retainers that came off of this head. We're also gonna be using the valve stem seals from BTR, which are right here. We're gonna be installing those along with their springs. So we can go ahead and get this thing reassembled. I'm gonna take a little bit of assembly lube. Then we can take our new valve seal and just simply push it on over that so that it seats and seals nice and flat to the bottom of the head. Super simple and easy. Then we can take our valve that belongs there. I'm gonna put a little bit more assembly lube on the tip of the valve. Help it slide through the seal nice and easily. Making sure that the seal stays nice and seated. So now that we've got the valve in with our new seal, we can take one of our new springs right here. We can set that on there and grab our spring compressor and our spring retainer, just like so. And now we can start compressing that valve down so that we can get the keepers in. Get our valve spring compressor set up just like so. Get that to a point where we're going to be able to get our keepers back in. I like to put a little bit of assembly lube on the keepers themselves. Easiest way I found to do this is magnetize the screwdriver. Then once you have them both in there and seated, we can go ahead and start letting up on the spring compressor. And as you can see, the spring retainer will slide right over the little keepers, which will actually lock it down onto the valve. Just like so. And then you're good to go. I went ahead and got our first head all reassembled. All the new valve springs and seals are in. Everything looks really good. I'm super happy with it. Very easy process, just very time consuming to lap everything and get all the new springs and everything installed. So now that we've got this one done, I'm gonna throw the valve cover on it. We'll throw it up on the bench and I'm gonna jam out the next one real quick so we can finally start reassembling this engine. So now that we've got the cylinder heads all ready to go, it's time to get some lifters ready so that we can soak these while we're starting to assemble the engine so they're ready to go when we go to drop them in. So we went with the BTR LS7 style lifters. So we're gonna go ahead and put some parts washing solvent in this little container. We'll go one by one, clean them up with a brush that's not gonna lose its bristles, then throw it in here with some fresh oil and let them soak. We'll put the lid on that, set it aside until we're ready to install them. So let's go ahead and run through all these, get them cleaned and ready to go. So like I said, I already felt these, but you do want to just feel them, see how they roll, make sure that there's no tough spots or hard spots, because if there are, you want to spend extra time cleaning those ones, and then make sure you check them again after you oil them to make sure that they feel all right. If they don't, if they feel bindy at all, just stop and contact whoever made your lifters and see what they recommend you do. Go ahead and set those in there. Now we can take some oil, whatever oil you're going to be using, and I'm just going to dump it all over these. Now I'm going to throw the lid on it, and we can set this thing out of the way, somewhere where they can just chill until we're ready for them. Now that we've got everything cleaned up, we're finally ready to start putting some new parts on this thing. We're going to start off with the timing chain tensioner. It's more of a damper really. But to get the bolts out, to get this old one out, we need to loosen up the oil pump, try to move it forward, get those bolts out so that we can swap it out with this unit right here. So now we can just back these out. We already loosened the bolts on the bottom that hold the oil pickup tube. Now we can pull the oil pump forward. Set it off to the side, and we'll get that swapped out. Now we can grab the new one and get it installed. Gonna grab a torque wrench, and this can go to 18 foot-pounds or 216 inch-pounds. Now that we've got our oil pump off and out of the way and our new timing chain guide in place, we're gonna get ready to install our new camshaft. Like I mentioned earlier, we went with the BTR truck Norris cam. Here's the cam card, so if you guys wanna check it out. This is not the NSR cam. This one does require valve springs. That's why we installed them earlier. But now that we've got everything ready to go, we're gonna clean our camshaft and make sure that you clean it really good. We did get some debris off of ours. Then we'll coat it very liberally with some assembly lube and get this thing slapped in. So let's grab the camshaft and get this thing in. We're gonna wanna make sure that we give this thing a nice hefty coat of assembly lube. I'm gonna go up to about there for now. Go ahead and make sure we get this thing completely covered. Now that we've got this thing covered in assembly lube, I'm gonna go ahead and start sliding this thing in. We're gonna try as hard as we can not to ding it on the bearings. Just wanna keep it nice, level, and straight. Once we get to the next one, I'll put some more assembly lube on this side. Put some more lube on it. You don't want to force it. If you feel anything weird, turn it a little bit and it'll usually pop right in place. So this is where it starts to get difficult because you don't have much leverage on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a long screwdriver that I had. And you can kind of use this to help you leverage it. Just like so. And we've got this thing in place. We are good to go. So now we can grab our cam gear, our retaining plate, and start putting this thing all back together. So now that we've got the camshaft in, we can start installing the retaining plate. This is the one that we're using from BTR. Then we can install our cam gear. We're using the 3-bolt 4-pole, and it came with some new bolts. So we'll get the cam retaining plate thrown on there, and then we can throw the gear on. I like to put a little bit of oil on the O-ring seal here. It's very important. And we've got our bolts with, in our case, a T40 TORQE bit. You can get a kit to go with a hex head bolt, I believe, but we're gonna be sticking with the hex bolts. We're going to be torquing the Torx head bolts for our cam retaining plate down to 11 foot-pounds. Alright, now we can grab our cam gear and get that on. So like I mentioned before, we're going to want to go dot to dot when we line this thing up. Not sure if you guys can see that mark right there, but that's the dot. And then there's a dot right here at 12 o'clock on our crank sprocket. But we're going to go ahead and slap this thing on. Now that we got it all lined up, I'm going to pop this back off. Try to get this in here. Just like that. Make sure none of your marks moved, which we look like we're doing pretty good. Throw a bolt in it. Now we can torque down the cam sprocket to 26 foot-pounds. Now we're going to throw our oil pump back on. We are using the same one that came off. I'm just going to go ahead and slide this on carefully. Go into place like so. And I'm going to put some bolts in it loosely. So now that we've got those bolts in finger tight, you don't want them tight really at all. You just want them snugged, and I even back them off a tiny bit. And then we're going to turn the engine over. And if the oil pump needs to move, it can. And then we'll go through and start snugging them back up. I'm going to go around one more time, and then I'm going to start snugging these up. Now we can torque the oil pump down to 18 foot-pounds. Now that we've got the cam and oil pump back on, we've got the engine flipped over. We're going to clean up the mating surface for the oil pan. Then we can get ready to set the timing cover and the oil pan back on. Now before we put the oil pan on, I'm going to delete the pressure relief valve in the pan. Like I showed you guys earlier, we took that one out. We're going to go ahead and put our plug in there. This is the one that we're using from Summit. Like everything else, I'll link what I can in the description below. So we'll go ahead and get our pressure relief plug put in. I would just go until the washer starts to crush. Now we're ready to put the front main seal in our timing cover. So we can go ahead and get that lined up. Grab our seal driver tool and we'll tap this thing in. Make sure that it's flat and flush. Looks like it is, so we're good to go. We can get ready to install this on the engine. Now that we've got the seal in our new timing cover, we can go ahead and set this on. We're not going to tighten it up. We're just going to set it in place for now so that we can grab the balancer and start trying to line this thing up. Now that we've got all the timing cover bolts started, they're all loose, finger tight. So we're going to go ahead and take our balancer and we're going to set this on there and start trying to get this thing sucked in using the old bolt that came off. so that we can use it to center the timing cover. We're going to go ahead and torque the harmonic balancer bolt now. We're going to go 111 foot-pounds, back off 360 degrees, and then torque it down to 59 foot-pounds, according to Summit Racing's website. So let's go ahead and hit it with 111. Now we can back off one full turn. Which would put us right there. Now we can torque it again to 59 foot-pounds. Alright, we're good to go with the balancer bolt. Now that we've got the balancer on and seated to center the timing cover, we just took our finger and a ruler, ran it across the lip here, and it feels pretty smooth. We don't have the special fixture for it, so it's close enough. We're going to go ahead and torque all the bolts down to 18 foot-pounds. Alright, and we can throw this back on and just snug it down, and we are good to go. We're finally ready to start putting the oil pan on, so I'm going to take a little bit of RTV in each corner. We're going to put some where the timing cover meets the block, and then we're going to put some where the rear cover meets the block. We're not going to put a whole bunch, just enough to go across there. Now we can set the oil pan gasket on here. And we can grab the pan itself and a couple bolts. Now we can torque this thing down. We're going to start in the center, work our way out in a crisscross pattern. We're going to torque all of the bigger bolts to 18 foot-pounds, and then the two that go into the rear cover, the longer bolts, we're going to torque those to 106 inch-pounds. Then we can switch over to inch-pounds for the rear two. Alright, that's torqued down. We can flip this thing over and start putting lifters in it. Now that we've got the cam in, timing cover on, and oil pan on, we're going to go ahead and drop our new lifters in, get the trays in, torque those down, so that we can get ready to slap the heads on it. Doesn't really matter which way that you put the oil hole that's on the lifter, but I like to keep them all in the same direction, so I'm going to put them to the left. Put it into our tray. Alright, now we can do the same thing with the rest of them and get all the lifters in. Now that we've got the new lifters and trays in there, we can go ahead and torque down the bolts. For a Gen 3, you want 106 inch-pounds, and for a Gen 4, you want 89 inch-pounds. Now that our lifters and trays are installed and torqued down, we can go ahead and start cleaning the head mating surface and get it ready for a new gasket, as well as our freshened up cylinder heads. I'm just going to be using some acetone on a rag. Make sure we get any oil off the surface. As you guys can see, we've already cleaned all of the old gasket material off. So we'll go ahead, hit this thing with an acetone and a lint-free rag and get it cleaned up. Now that we've got the mating surface for the cylinder head all cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and pop our dowel pins in. We're going to put them on the block side. You can hear the tone change. If you need to tap it in, you can hear when it bottoms out. That one bottomed out off the bat. So now that we've got the dowel pins in, we can go ahead and do the same thing and clean the mating surface on the cylinder head. Then we can set our new gaskets on and get these things torqued down. Now that we've got the block and head ready to go together, we've got our new head gaskets. We're using the BTR LS2 style head gaskets that they make. Pretty nice unit, so we're gonna go ahead and slap these on. Pretty boldly marked front, so just go ahead and slap this guy on like so. Now we can grab our cylinder head and some bolts and get it set on there. Good. Yep.
Good.
All right, now that we've got the heads on, we can go ahead and throw all the bolts in it and then start torquing it. Now that we've got the heads on, we can start torquing these things down. We're gonna be following the factory recommended torque sequence. I am gonna run through and get these ran in the sequence. And then our first pass is gonna be at 22 foot-pounds. Then we'll have to go back over them with 90 degrees since they are the factory torque to yield bolts. Then one more time at 70 degrees. And then we can finally torque the top smaller bolts down to 22 foot-pounds. Now the one that we have here is the second version of these bolts, so they're all the same length. If you have the first version, your torque sequence is a little bit different. I believe it's 22, then 90 degrees, then another 90 degrees. But if your engine's different, make sure to verify with the hardware that you are using. All right, now we can go over them and do our 90 degrees. Gonna start our 90 degrees. So I'm gonna start them all something like this and go to right about there. All right, so that was our 90 degree. Now we need to do 70 degrees.
Well, they couldn't figure it out in torques.
Now that we've done 22 foot-pounds, 90 degrees, then 70 degrees on all the big bolts, we can jump up here to the smaller bolts, and I'm going to torque those down to 22 foot-pounds. All right, this head's all set. We can go to the other side, do the same thing. Now I'm going to drop the push rods back in it. We're just gonna go ahead, throw all these on, finger tight for now, and then we'll go through and tighten down the ones we can, turn the motor over, tighten down the rest, just like we did when we took it apart. So we'll go ahead and slam through getting these all put on real quick. We're getting set up here to torque all the rocker arms down. So I'm gonna show you how to do it on an individual cylinder basis. Now we're gonna turn the engine over and you're gonna see this rocker start to pivot as it comes up on the nose of the cam. And we're gonna wait until it's on the base circle, which is probably where it's at right now, but I'm gonna show you guys as it comes up. It's coming to the nose of the cam. As you can see, it's going down. We're gonna wait for it to come back up. Right there, go a little bit past it, it'll wiggle, and then we can torque it down to 22 foot-pounds. And you can do multiple cylinders at a time if you know if they're on the base circle or not, but if you haven't done it before, just go through it like this. Takes an extra minute, but you know that you're on the base circle. So we're gonna go ahead and run through these and get the rest of them torqued down. All right, this side's done. We can go to the other side. Now that we've got the rockers all torqued down, we can put our valve covers on. The valve cover bolts I usually would just snug up, but I'm gonna go ahead and torque them so that you guys know the spec just in case you wanted it. It's 106 inch-pounds, like many other things on this engine, so we'll go ahead and torque them. We're gonna throw the flex plate back on. We've got some Loctite on the bolts, and we're just gonna line this up with the little alignment hole, just like so. Get one of these things started quick. I do them in a star pattern even by hand because you can feel it pulling the flex plate in towards the crankshaft even by hand. We're going to start off at 15 foot-pounds, continuing to go in a star pattern. Now we can bump up the torque to 37 foot-pounds for our second pass. Now we can bump up once again to 74. Alright, we've got the flex plate all torqued down. This thing's ready to set in. Alright guys, so we've got Dad's new 6-liter all put back together, and I think this little LY6 is going to turn out to be a perfect upgrade for the stock 5.3 that was in his truck, especially with our new BTR truck Norris cam. Now obviously, if we knew we were going to be going with a rec port headed 6-liter, we might have chose our cam a little bit differently, but we ordered everything for the 5.3 because we thought we were going to be able to just do the quick easy cam swap, and it obviously did not turn out that way. But we didn't feel like returning a whole bunch of parts and dealing with all of that, so we decided to just go with it. And I think that cam's going to work out perfectly fine in this rec port headed 6-liter. It's going to sound fantastic like the truck Norris cams always do. I'm actually really excited to see how it does in this 6-liter in the LY6 with the 823 heads. I'm very curious to see how it performs on this thing. I think it's going to be a great daily driver for him with a little bit of extra power. So super excited for that. Make sure to stick around for the next video when we finally get this thing dropped into his truck to complete the 5.3 to 6-liter swap and hopefully get this thing fired up for the very first time. So as always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms. Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.